Speaker. Deputy Speaker, this bill on the Net Zero Economy Authority is fundamentally a bureaucratic waste that imposes a harsh new series of obligations on small, medium and large businesses. The Albanese Labor government's ideologically obsession with top-down, Canberra-centric approaches is going to cost taxpayers some $1.1 billion over the medium term with this Net Zero Economy Authority bill. The bill is nothing more than another industrial relations bill to serve Labor's union donors, disguised as a bill for the regions. The authority explicitly has responsibility for facilitating public and private sector participation and investment in greenhouse gas emissions, reduction and net zero transformation initiatives in Australia, including in new industries. This provision is almost copied and pasted from the Clean Energy Finance Corporation's legislated role to facilitate increased flows of finance into the clean energy sector and to facilitate the achievement of Australia's greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets. The level of duplication of the proposed Net Zero Economies Authority's responsibility to promote new investment in the net zero transmission and existing Commonwealth entities is another example of this government's obsession with red tape and union agendas. I mean, how many federal agencies tasked with renewable financing does the Commonwealth require? You know, you've got this one which has been set up. You've got the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, then you've got Labor's Rewiring the Nation program, which has, you know, adding all this up, it's billions of dollars. And we know what this will do to local economies, particularly in regional seats where you currently have gas and coal closures, where you currently have power stations. In a regional centre, what exactly will happen to that economy? Because the workers in those power stations, it's not just those workers that will disappear, but it's all the small and family businesses associated in that local region. Might be the local butcher that, you know, supplying fresh meat from farms in the area. It might be local advertising companies, sign writers and so forth that, you know, write the signs at the local butchers and other small businesses in the area. As the workers disappear, what happens to the local hairdressers and barbers? The local cleaning companies that go in and clean where these workers are going from. So, you know, they'll go in there and clean up the toilets and so forth and the lunchrooms and everything else. You've got local real estate agents as well that sell properties in the area as well as lease them for new people coming in. Prior to coming into this place, I used to run a pest control business. Local pest controllers, what happens to them? You know, to make sure the place isn't overtaken with cockies and rats and everything else. None of them get anything in this, right? Local pubs or local cafes, people supplying lunches and coffees in the morning. The volunteer organisations that look after the families and that involved in the area as well, might be at the local church or at the local football club or the local Lions club. As you take people out of the regions, what happens to all of them? There's nothing in this bill to help them. And so this is fundamentally about, with Labor's net zero targets, closing coal, closing gas, not replacing them with any other baseload energy. You know, they've sort of said no to emissions-free modern nuclear power. They want to do everything with solar and wind, all made in China, by the way, right? You can't. The only solar panels made in this country is Tindo Solar. I got them on my roof. They're $100 more expensive than every other solar panel you can buy. Everything else is made in China. I mean, we had the minister in here crowing the other day in question time about all the solar farms that he'd rolled out, and once again, not one of those panels is made from Tindo, I can tell you. They're all imported, And the Australian people do understand that you're replacing Australian minerals, and gas, coal and gas, with Chinese-made solar panels and Chinese-made wind farms that aren't renewed. They've got to be buried. They last 20 years max, 25 years possibly. And so the Treasurer delivered a budget the other night, big deficit next year, 43 bill, but small surplus this year, built on a back of coal, gas and other mining activities. We're replacing it all with Chinese-made wind farms, and the minister won't consider alternatives. So it is a real concern, and we know that the actions already of this government, that once established, the government will continue to ram through new an additional responsibility into this authority to support its net zero climate emissions. The union movement want the Net Zero Economy Authority to be legislated because the authority will be able to collect the personal information of employees at coal-fired power stations, from financial records to phone numbers, and the bill does not even require the relevant employee's consent for their information to be passed from their employer onto the Net Zero Economy Authority. This isn't a bill for Australia. This is a bill for the Albanese Labor government's union donors, as often we've seen in this place over the last couple of years with different legislation that's come through. I mean, look at the biggest expenditure in the budget the other night for the Minister for Workplace Relations, and it wasn't even mentioned in his press release after the budget. It was all about another $60 million for the unions. So this is essentially an industrial relations bill disguised as a bill for the regions and transition. The Coalition will oppose this bill due to its bureaucratic waste and duplication. Top-down centric approach based here in Canberra, which is set to fail on delivering on the unique needs of the regions, partly which I outlined there, and partly which other members, particularly Queensland members like the member for Hinkler and the member for Capricornia, have outlined as well. Imposition on small, family, medium and large businesses, and the fact that this is another example of Labor's haphazard approach on industry policy, which delivers no guarantees for local workers. There's no guarantees here at all. Under Labor's renewable-only plan, there is a risk for major job losses. And jobs will be lost in mining, coal and the gas sector, and all of those jobs in small and medium businesses that I just outlined a moment ago. And what are these people going to do when they lose their job? They have families. They've got mortgages. They pay rents. These people are already doing it tough under the last couple of years with inflation and cost of living. Mark from my electorate in North Lakes asked me these questions just on the weekend. He said, what is the current government doing to grow our economy by returning Australian manufacturing locally? But the way I estimate it, we've lost 100,000 jobs in manufacturing in the last 2 years. That's from the horse's mouth, from the Minister for Manufacturing, Minister Husic, where he said that jobs in Australian manufacturing are 900,000. We know that during COVID, jobs are around 1 million manufacturing jobs. So in the last 2 years, since Scott Morrison was no longer Prime Minister, 10% of jobs are already gone. But if you listen to the government, they're talking about everything being Australian-made in this bill and everything else. It's not what's happening in reality. My constituent, also says, Mark from North Lakes, that the current cost of living is out of control, and what's the plan for the next 6 months to lower it? Have they considering lowering fuel excise, forcing a reduction in interest rates? But this bill is going to add another $1 billion of spending on top. We estimate there's about $315 billion in additional spending since the government was elected in the forward estimates over the next 4 years. So if you take the last budget of the Morrison government, $315 billion additional on top of that in the last 2 years within the forward estimates. Now that does add to inflation. How how as the current government, Mark says, assisting small businesses to remain economically viable instead of charging more tax, less deductions, and woke green incentive deductions, which aren't viable for the majority of small businesses. And Mark sums it up well, given that we're talking about the Net Zero Economy Authority bill, which once again, another $1 billion, nothing for small and family business. John from Griffin said, my burning question is what happens when we get and reach net zero? Having spent billions of dollars, when will we get a return on investment? Now, the government often says, oh, well, we're a net zero superpower. What does that mean, a net zero superpower? I mean, it sounds good in elections. Oh, we're going to be a net zero, a renewable energy superpower. They're selling off, they're closing everything down and everything's going to be made in China. And they've got some sort of plan, oh, well, we're going to make some solar panels here, when clearly they're $100 extra just for Tindo panels. Not everyone can afford that. And this minister will not consider modern nuclear power that's emissions-free, where we can actually use uranium and so forth that's in the ground here. They're extending in the budget the good work that the member for Hinkler did when he was resource manager or minister, mapping out the minerals in the ground throughout Australia. I wonder whether they'll even include uranium in that. I doubt it. But that's a good capacity. The reality is if this minister is serious about looking after Australians and is serious, really serious about achieving net zero, he wouldn't just automatically rule out modern nuclear power that has zero emissions, would he? That we can actually mine some of the resources here to replace the coal and gas that they're closing down, and you could build a station where coal and gas is shutting down, and all of those small and family businesses that I just mentioned before, from the butchers to the hairdressers to the real estate agents to the pest controllers to the volunteer organisations, would remain viable in the regions, because that's where you'd put the modern nuclear power reactor that has zero emissions. But I know we can't do that, despite the fact that they're continuing on and signed up to AUKUS, which was that Scott Morrison negotiated, despite the fact that we have a current nuclear reactor in the middle of Sydney and have had for 50 years. He won't consider any of that. And there's just so many people that basically support it, including former Prime Minister Bob Hawke, including Dick Smith, including Tony Irwin, who was on 4BC Brisbane the other day. He's a nuclear expert that's worked on 8 power stations in Britain with their energy agency over there. So where are they going to be? They're going to be where there's currently coal and gas getting shut down. That's what we've said a number of times. That's what we've said a number of times.
Well, you don't know where
no problem at all. So
you don't know where the coal-fired
a nuclear power station can last for up to 60 years. Can last for up to 60 years.
Order.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. While solar panels, Chinese-made solar panels, last for 25 years, right? We wouldn't have all the transmission costs, so we wouldn't have the environmental footprint that this government wants to do with solar and wind only, right? The footprint is 370 times bigger than a modern nuclear power station. So you've got a bit of paper like that. That's the footprint on the environment that we currently have for coal or gas, or if we replace that with an emissions-free nuclear plant. To get the same amount of power, the Albanese Labor government is going to get 370 times that. What is the impact on the environment, on the trees, on the koalas, on the wedge-tailed eagles, everything else? They don't want to talk about any of that. And if they were serious about reducing emissions and were serious about climate change, they wouldn't just rule this out hands down. And the reality is this, I think in the GenCost report it said that nuclear power, if someone wanted to build it, was $17 billion. Snowy Hydro alone is going to cost $12 billion. What's all this costing? Another $1 billion here for another authority. No, they're not serious about it, and the Australian people are waking up.
Order.